We can often get so busy with all of the tasks and things that we need to do to care for our loved one. What does care beyond the checkboxes mean? My guest today is Malika Moore. She is the founder of Aging and Amazing, a company that strives to support older adults, caregivers, and the professionals that surround them. Malika Moore also has her Master's of Social Work. She is an aging life care professional and is also a licensed clinical social worker in the District of Columbia in Maryland. She has worked in a variety of healthcare settings, including behavioral health, community education, and all of this has prepared her for serving our aging population and family caregivers. She has served in many different capacities as a geriatric care manager, a medical social worker, a psychotherapist, a support group facilitator, and an adjunct professor. Today we talk about how her passion and innovation for improving the quality of life for caregivers is beyond the checkboxes. We look at common challenges that family caregivers face when they are working with their loved one, how this approach can support dignity, autonomy, and individuality for our older adults, how we as caregivers can balance the need for efficiency and practicality while providing care that goes beyond the checkboxes, where families can look to for support, the various emotions that we experience in our caregiving role, and what we should look for when we're working with professionals to support our caregiving journey. And for those of us that need a framework, where do we start? And how Aging and Amazing is bridging the gap between online and in-person care management, and the success story when we implement empathy and education. And looking ahead, what are Malika's hopes and aspirations for the future of caregiving when we go beyond the checkboxes? Here is my interview with Malika Moore. Hi, Malika. I'm so glad we get to do this today. I love your work. I love how you have such a heart for people, and that's reflective on who you are and what you do. So thank you for being with me today.
Hi, Nicole. I'm so happy to be here with you, your kindred spirit, all the great work that you're doing and just following you as you and your wonderful platform grows. Thank you for having me.
Yes, you're so kind. Thank you. I know we are kindred spirits. I think when we first chatted, we found that out about each other. We're like, okay.
We
Oh,
connect. We
yes,
connect. You
yes.
get me.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh, well, I loved when we were talking about, okay, what direction do we want to take our conversation in? And you really had this heart to share that cares really more and beyond those check boxes that, we like to check with the tasks. What does care beyond the checkbox mean to you? And before we dive into that, I also want you to tell us, how did you come into the place of wanting to care for older adults, and a little bit more about your story?
Sure. So a little bit more about me. I've always been called this old soul, and I didn't quite know that it would direct my career path, but it did. So an old soul is a compliment. As a child, I was always told that I act older than I am, or you could find me nestled under some older adult, maybe being told to get out the room.
Yeah.
Also, but I mean, that was just, they were kind of like older adults were my peers in my mind at that
Mm-hmm.
time when I was a child. And so as my life kind of went along, I still found this as being, oh, it's coming back to me where I'm with older adults or helping them in some kind of capacity. And I ended up going to get a degree, my bachelor's degree in psychology. And I wasn't quite sure that I wanted to work with older adults at that time. Then someone convinced me and said, you'll be a great social worker.
Mm.
And I looked more into that. And that's when it all started as a career path. My last year of my field placement, I received the John A. Hartford Scholarship. And so this
Amazing.
meant I had to work with older adults. I didn't quite know what that meant. I knew I wanted to work with adults, but when I arrived here in DC I attended the University of Alabama, and they had a Washington, DC field placement. And I arrived here and realized, oh no, older adults, this is a different set of issues and concerns, and they need special attention. And you can't neglect the older adults without thinking about the people who are caring for them. Mm-hmm. And so this really evolved, and I decided as a younger person to immerse myself in it, because I knew I really couldn't fully understand, even though I'm helping navigate different systems, put resource in place. I've been a psychotherapist. I worked in nursing homes. I kind of said, let me wrap myself in this and learn as much as I can that's not in the books, that's not on the checklist, and see what this is like. And I went to work with children and families for 6 months and realized, no, older adults and family caregivers, that's my niche, and that's where I need to be. And I've started a whole company to really bring together all these skills and knowledge. And what do you know, like, we're getting older each day.
We all are. Yep.
So that's adding to the knowledge, is adding to my sensitivity towards certain things, and even my understanding of things that my client said to me 10 years ago that I'm getting more now, like, oh, okay, that's what they meant. Yes. Those things. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. And your company is Aging and Amazing.
Yes, we're all aging and amazing.
Yeah, we really are. I love that.
Yes, my company's Aging and Amazing. It's based in Washington, D.C. However, we have international platform. We offer care management services, and that's basically putting the puzzle pieces together for family caregivers and older adults, whether they stay at home or move. We have our Aging and Amazing signature online community that's international, where we're bringing everyone together to share resources, to share stories, and get connected with the right people. And then we have consulting work still in the nursing homes. I have a passion for nursing homes, and definitely I'm always going in there saying, hey, think beyond the check boxes. Right. This is a person here. This is a family here. And education and training. So that is all encompassing Aging and Amazing, and really just bringing all those key players around and resources to strengthen the networks around older adults.
It's such a great platform. I've been able to see it, and you talk about that care beyond the check boxes. When you say that, what does it mean to you? How does it reflect your passion, innovation, enhancing the quality of life for those older adults, those caregivers? Can you share more about that?
Sure. Care beyond the check boxes, it came to me when I started working in the nursing homes, because there's so much to do. You're so busy and you're running, and you have to get to this room and that room. I really just sat down one evening, probably late evening, coming home from a nursing home working, and just thought, okay, we have these tasks to do. We all do. And checklists have their place. Like, they help us keep on task. We're able to know, all right, maybe I need to revisit this. But when it comes to human beings, when it comes to care, really thinking beyond that, because we can miss so many factors that are in play if we're only saying, check, I completed this, check, I completed that. And for example, say someone's labeled as having a behavior problem. It could be that, oh, if we look beyond the check boxes, this person was an executive but prior to their illness. And so they're still in executive mode. So maybe it looks like a behavior problem to you, but in their mind, they are keeping things in order, and you don't know what you're doing. I'm helping you stay on task. So if we kind of adapt and roll with that, it's like, oh, okay, I can manage this person's care or their quote unquote behavior a little bit differently, knowing what's going on. Or another example, Nicole, is someone being difficult or angry or upset. Like, what's behind that anger and being upset? And if you look beyond these check boxes of the screenings and the questionnaires that we have to do, it could be, wow, they were walking and doing everything on their own last week. And now their life has drastically changed. And we want them to be cheery and pleasant with everyone that comes in this room. They're grieving. They're grieving what was. They don't know what the future holds. So just taking a step back and pausing and saying, okay, what's beyond the checkbox? And that's how I'm going to provide better care, whether I'm a healthcare professional or a caregiver, or I'm going to bring in someone if I just don't have the bandwidth to manage what's beyond the check boxes.
Oh, completely. It really brings that holistic lens and approach to it. You talked about some of those misconceptions or common challenges, right? Maybe the one gentleman is just wanting to keep us in task based on his past experience. What are some of those other common challenges that families and older adults might be facing? How can we overcome these? And the second side of that question is, we've got these traditional approaches in our caregiving that often rely on the checkbox. And you just spoke to that, like how important it is that we move beyond that limited mindset.
Well, I think we may have to come back to your two-sided, your two-sided question. I think that there's a lot of information out here in general, and that's a good thing. We have so many people writing articles, we have different podcasts, we have all these books and information, and that kind of guides. We have research, that leads us and guides us to put things together and maybe list them and put them in the checklist. What I often find, especially working as a aging life care professional with Aging Life Care Association, that sometimes caregivers or even older adults are hard on themselves if they can't follow the check boxes. For example, I read this book and it said that I should get up in the morning and write the list for mom or dad for the week and prep the meals and do all of these things. So you'll have suggestions on what these check boxes should be. And then what I find is when they're not able to meet the mark, it's like, I'm not a good caregiver, or I'm not doing this aging thing correctly, or this caregiving thing correctly. There are certain guidelines, like in healthcare professions, we have to follow X, Y, Z. And I'm not saying dismiss that. What I'm saying is just leave room, because I think our stories are all for someone as a guide, not to say, do it just like I did it, because it's no way. I mean, even you can have somebody with similar chronic illnesses, your journey and path with that person is going to be totally different. But along the way, you'll pick up and grasp things that, oh, this worked for me, this didn't work for me. So really encouraging people to have a checklist, but also trust yourself, trust the people that are around you, trust your observations to help you create your own guide. There's no manual for life.
Isn't that the truth?
There's no manual for life. There's no manual for caregiver. We have to lend ourselves to progression and not perfection. And a lot of times when we lean towards more perfection, I feel like people are so hard on themselves and really paint this picture of this idealistic caregiver that doesn't necessarily exist.
Yeah, that's so true. And we're hard on ourselves because we want to get it right. But I know doing the best we can is all we can do, really.
Right.
Yeah, it is. So talking about the approach, and when we emphasize that dignity and that autonomy and that individuality, that really differs from the checkbox. I think the checkbox model that you're speaking to makes it more about the task and less about the person. How do you, and Aging and Amazing, but also how do you encourage others to ensure that quality of life and care, but while we still need to get all of those tasks done? Is there tools or mindset that you would share with us on how we can do that well?
First of all, remembering that you're human, whether you're a professional at doing this, supporting caregivers, or you just woke up and now this is your task. This
Yeah.
is something that you have to do. I say start with the checklist. Start with the checklist. If you've listened to a great podcast such as yours, Nicole's, you have wonderful speakers.
Mm,
Start there. If you've read an article, start there. If you Google a checklist, start there. What I'm saying, that can not be the end all be all,
mm-hmm,
because you're
mm-hmm.
going to adapt and you're going to become the expert in your own life, in your own caregiving journey.
Yeah.
And you're going to pull from so many others to kind of create this whole wealth of information that helps you not only pay attention to quality of care, but really boost up the quality of life. For me, I think as busy professionals, we can sometimes all get caught up in, oh, check, 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 check. So it's
Mm-hmm.
this reminder when you're seeing somebody's behavior, really being attuned to someone's body language, whether they have dementia or some other chronic illness, looking at body language, listening to the tone of someone's voice, taking a step back to reflect and say, hey, I might have missed something in the shuffle of trying to get that appointment scheduled, or look for patterns. Like, okay, every time we go to this appointment or every time I mention this subject, the person's behavior changes. But when I talk about this, I get more, the person's more receptive.
Mm-hmm.
So really just having all your antennas up and allowing yourself to make mistakes, allowing yourself to really make mistakes, which circles back to being human.
Yeah.
And just, if you can, communicate and get feedback from others to say, you may have to go back and apologize and say, you know what, Mr. or Miss Jones, I
Mm-hmm.
missed that. I was so focused on the fact that you wanted to relocate that I did not pick up on the fact that we just need to sit here a moment because this is hard, even though you want to do it. Let's put my agenda or even the agenda we created together. Let's put these check boxes to the side and let me
Right.
check in on you. And for those caregivers who say, look, I'm just task oriented, or those older adults who say, I need the checkbox, I don't have time for all the other information, that's okay. I call
Mm-hmm.
that knowing your
Yeah.
strengths.
Knowing our
So,
personality. Yeah.
right, that is a-okay. But what
Mm-hmm.
I do suggest is that you bring someone in who can, whether it be a professional or a friend or someone who may observe, like, hey, Susie, I'm making up all kinds of names today. Susie,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
feel like when you were talking to your mom, XYZ, then maybe they may volunteer and say, well, maybe I can bring up this subject or go talk to your mom and I'll get a different response.
Mm.
So just being adaptive, making sure that you allow yourself to make mistakes and write your own guide. So once you find things that work for you and your loved ones, start to note them, start to document it, because what's going to happen is when you start to meet with different professionals, or when you expand your team of power players in your care or in your caregiving
Mm-hmm.
journey, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
say, look, this is what works. To get to the doctor's appointments, we have to stop by Anne's cookie shop
Mm-hmm.
before we get there or after we get there. Or when my loved one starts doing this, remember that she was a nurse. So the nurses coming in are, you're getting a little what seems like pushback because of this. Does that all make sense, Nicole? And
It
just kind of
does. Yeah. It just gives
putting it
us
all together.
permission to think about it differently. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's
Absolutely.
not one, it's not,
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could say just do this. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing is you're in it and you're more wise or have more wisdom than you think.
Yeah.
So encouraging people in that way.
Yeah, to trust themselves. And I always say that each of our experiences with our loved ones are so unique and different, right? We're working with different challenges and people and personalities, and we're different. And so we also have to, while we might have a framework, then be adaptable to make it fit the needs that we have in that moment.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
When families come to you, because you've had so much experience working with a lot of different people, what information do you find that they are looking for most? What are some of those common challenges? If you could say, oh, they fall into these different categories, what would that be?
That's a great question. So common challenges that I find is just people not knowing where to start. Sometimes they've just found me by chance.
Yeah.
So not really knowing where to start and not knowing, like I gave that analogy that we love to use here at Agent Amazing, is the puzzle pieces. They don't know where to even start putting the puzzle pieces of the care together. And speaking of going beyond the check boxes, I sit down with a lot of caregivers or older adults who have, everyone's told them what to do. Like they've my friend said I should do this and I should do that and I should move and I should tell my mom this and I should do this. And so a lot of it is just like I'm getting information overload. I've tried a few things that even maybe professionals have recommended, or friends or family friends, or the neighbor who visited said I should be doing this. And I tried some of those things. It's not working for me. I can't do this. I'm stressed. I'm overwhelmed. So really, as a professional, I'm saying, all right, the first thing I need to do is get more information. So I can't really make any recommendations or even work alongside you until I get more information. And another big piece of that is building rapport. I know that's the first thing they taught us in social work school. If you're going to get anywhere with anyone, you have to build a relationship. And that helps me understand better what's going on. Oftentimes that's hearing the caregiver story and completing like a quality of life therapeutic assessment, so I can, who is this person prior to the illness, whether I'm talking to them or the family, and that just helps me put in context, where are you from, all of those factors. And if I'm misinterpreting things, that gives the family or that person, if they're able, the care recipient, to say, no, that's not really what that meant. This is how it was living in my household. So not removing the assumptions and really just getting the information. So people just not knowing what to do is like one category. And then the second one is just the information overload. They're getting so many tips and tricks and guides and reading everything. And it's just like, I don't know what to do with all of this information.
Yeah, where to start.
The things I've tried is not working.
It's also, who do we go to and who can we trust? Do you have ideas on when families are in that information overload? Are there some things we can look for when we're looking for companies or people to work with that could be helpful when it helps steer us in the right direction?
Absolutely. So I did mention that I am a care manager with the Aging Life Care Association. That's a great organization where you can find care managers all over. So I think that's a good place to start. But also, even when I have different families call me, I will say, they'll tell me, well, Malika, I'm interviewing various care management agencies. I encourage that, because when you have someone working alongside you as a care manager, it's a very intimate space to be into. It's very personal. You want to have a good relationship with that person. You want the personality to fit, because it's one thing to be able to have the skill set, but then if we're just not meshing well or we're not communicating well, it's not a good fit. So you've you've made something more stressful than it probably had to be, because now you're managing something that's not working. So interviewing and really telling that person how you work, like how you process information, what life was like with your parent or your loved one. Because Nicole, a lot of times people assume you had a good relationship with that person. Right. That may not be the case at all. So I want to make sure this person is well taken care of, but there's some family history here that I want you to know about. that's getting in the way of me and being involved. And also letting that person know this is what I want to be involved with, and this is what I don't want to be involved with. I just want updates, that type of thing. The other thing is, like, if you can't get a hire a care manager, is your Department of Aging, going there, seeing what resources they have. And I don't know that you'll get as much of a choice of who you get assigned, but you have your questions ready, just like we encourage our clients before doctor's appointment. Have your questions ready, what they can support with, what they cannot support with, so you can fill those gaps, or like I say, those missing puzzle pieces. You can replicate those with the right resources and the right people. So those are just some things to start with, and you can look at credentials and experience, and you can ask for references, all of these things that make you feel comfortable that you've chosen the right person. And if all else fails and this person is not a good fit, move on. Find somebody else. It may be a pain, but move on and interview somebody else until you get the right fit.
Great advice. It's great advice, and it's helpful because I think in that information overload, we don't know always what to do and where to start. It's so helpful. And there's so many complex emotions. You reference the complicated dynamics at times. What are some of those other emotions you see when families come to you? Is it, I'm just guessing here because I've been there, that stress, right? We can feel overwhelmed. What are some of those dynamics that you witness?
It's stress. It's definitely stress, but financial stress. So it's sometimes unexpected financial obligations that maybe the caregiver has, or maybe they don't have access because the documents aren't in place yet to their loved ones' finances, and they're trying to figure out, like, what do I do to get all of this? There's also a lot of grief, because it's this anticipatory grief of what's going to happen. And also I meet with caregivers who say, look, I've been grieving for years. My mom hasn't been mom for so long. So this has been painful. This has been a long journey. What other types of emotions? Grief, anger. Sometimes there's anger there because maybe there wasn't a plan in place, or someone that shouldn't have been in care is in care, and the person's not getting what they need, and now they're all kind of blockades in place that legally they're trying to jump through hoops to get around. And there's a lot of sometimes sibling rivalry that is there that complicates things a little bit more. Inevitably, I always see that with families, even if it's kind of a good mix, like the family's doing well, things from the past come up when caregiving when caregiving need arises. Inevitably, those things, it may be the recital that person didn't make. It may be something that happened in your 20s or 30s that comes back up at that time. So it's just a big stir of all these emotions and guilt, because it's like none of these things can be changed now. So what do I do? Or, resentment for having to feeling like they have to step up in this role. One thing that I wish every caregiver, every older adult, every family knew: if you have a family and there's things that aren't going right, every family has their drama. It looks different. It feels different. It presents differently. Some people wrap a bow around it and you'll never know. But I work with enough families to know that don't feel badly, or don't feel like you can't reach out for help because you feel like, oh, what I hear my family's too messed up, like, to even start. I guarantee you're not the first family. Don't let that be the barrier, or that fear of being judged be the reason why you don't get help. I see that a whole lot. You've never seen a family like mine. And I always try to reassure people and say, look, I have my own family, whatever that means to you. I have my own family. So I understand that things can get complicated. But keep that in mind. You're not alone. You're in good company with some of the drama that you're experiencing.
I'm so glad you talk about that. I feel like it's more common that there's complicated dynamics rather than everything works well. And that we're not alone in it. And it isn't, we're not we think we're unique to that, but there are more of us out there. There are more of us out there. So, yeah, thank you for sharing about that. In addition to your platform, and when we talk about the checklist side of things, in some ways, families, we're dealing with relationship dynamics, but we know how important that technology and having a platform and a digital solution can support us and play a role. What do you find are those helpful technology or solutions that can do that and get us started and looking at implementing some new modes of caregiving in addition to the one that you've created, because it's a great platform to have that community?
Well, I have to personally keep up with the technology myself. I think that those generations change very quickly. And what we're astute on, we have to say, oh, I got to learn this.
Yeah.
I've been very pleased to see a lot of my caregivers using devices like Alexa to check in on their loved one who's in a nursing home, to play music for them if they're not able to get a hold of the activities people. It's just been very touching too. Or I've have a lot of families who are using cameras as an extra set of eyes, not to be too much in their personal space, but just to see, okay, I have an eye on these spaces that mom and dad are not going out of this area much. So at least I can keep an eye if I'm a long distance caregiver, or if you have someone in the area, to really monitor and honor if people want to age in place and do that as long as possible. So things like that are just so cool. Let's not forget about the watches with the fall detection and everything on it, making people who are able to use those things, even if you're a younger adult and maybe you have some kind of diagnosis of epilepsy or something like that, having that fall detection on your watch. Just these really cool things in kind of making, and I think we could go on and on about the different technology.
There's so many.
It's just great. I mean, you have to just delve in it and see what's your issue. There's probably a piece of technology for it, and see if it works for you.
Yeah, I always love to hear what your experience has been, and if you have some go-to favorites. I think it's fun to hear what people are using and finding.
Yeah, so Alexa's definitely a go-to. That has been great, especially seeing it in the nursing homes. Like I said, having had clients who aren't alert as they used to be, but their daughter in California is telling me that at 7 o'clock, she's playing her mom's favorite music, and she doesn't have to bother the staff there to do it for her. Because you know, a lot of these places are understaffed now. So being able to incorporate that, this is kind of like, I don't know if it's new, it's not new technology, but I store it in my closet. I have little pocket talker devices for hearing. A lot of times when I go out, people aren't hearing very well. And I keep those because what I've heard from older adults is that the hearing aids amplify every single sound, the creaks in the door, the pen dropping, the heels clicking across the floor. So it's too much stimulation. And so I keep the pocket talker handy. And a lot of times my clients are like, I don't think I want that. Then they get it and I speak into it and it's like, oh my gosh, I can hear you. I can hear what's being said. So that's not a new piece of technology. It's called a pocket talker, but it is my go-to. I take it with me because I almost always run into this issue of being hard of hearing. And I think that caregivers are always surprised, and my older adults are always surprised not knowing it existed. So I have to put that out there.
That's such a great tool. It's so helpful.
Right. Because not hearing can be mistaken for cognitive issues. And it's really the person just can't hear you. So even in the nursing homes, if I read a note that says somebody's hard of hearing, I'm asking the social workers, what did you use to ensure that this person heard what you were saying? And
Yeah.
so those beyond the check boxes,
I
right?
love it. Yes. Yes. And you
So,
do that so well of really bridging the gap between the tech and online, but also that in-person care
right.
management, you know. Yeah.
Right. Oh, in the online community, so it will be a year in June. So the community is like my little project that I've been working on and very passionate about. We're approaching a year. I'm
Awesome.
hiring someone to help manage it because it's been so wonderful.
Mhm.
This fall of this year, we'll be adding, it's called the TLC Caregiver Program. And it's a 6-week training for caregivers that we plan to offer free of charge. So people can either be in the community or not. So with that online community, it's just a space. It's not on Facebook. It's on the Circle platform. It's no other distractions,
Mhm.
just professionals who specialize in aging, and that's very broad. Anybody who's aging enthusiastically. So you could be in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 100s.
Yeah.
And then we have family caregivers. So we're really building out and developing that family caregiver space for a place where people can come and
Mm.
share what they've done beyond the check boxes, and also just share those different resources and strategies, or also get emotional support so
Mhm.
you can develop your own and you can see, hey, I'm not alone in this. And this is something that I can log on to 24 hours to not only take, but also be a giver.
It's so cool. And it's exactly what we need when we're in it is that community and that support. I mean, it's the one advice I always tell people too that are in caregiving is find your people and find a place where you can share what you've learned, but like you said, also be in that receiving role. Speaking of adults that might be underserved and in more rural communities and having those challenges, they would also have access to
Yeah.
the community, right? And reaching people like that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's international right now. We have, I think, about a 200, a little over 200, and it's just revamping. We have great sponsors in there like All Home
Mhm.
Care Matters. We have just so many people invested in it doing well. And so people like you and me are in there. So
Yeah.
I think the
Yeah.
more it grows, the better it'll be, and people will just have another resources because we talked about goodness a fit. So you want to
Yeah.
find what works for you
Yeah.
in the sea of all the resources.
Yes. Find the fit. Find the fit. Do you have any favorite success stories when you've worked with families and you've found, oh my gosh, they've been able to implement some of those tools and looking at that whole person and find success in that?
I like that you use the word success. I really think that that is a subjective word
Mm,
because for every family that I've worked with, for every client that I've worked with, for every organization that I've worked with, success is very unique. I had um, a, a client a couple of weeks ago. I started working with this family last year, and then their loved one had to be placed on hospice. And so we had a lot of planning to do. Before we
mm,
even, I was the one who recommended hospice as one of our options as I learned more of the information and what was
mhm,
happening.
mhm.
And so, as you can imagine, that's a stressful time, and it's kind of this waiting game. I hate to use that term,
Yeah,
but kind of this waiting period where the family, we know what's happening.
right.
It's just like when and what do we need to do to have in place before it happens. So before the person passes. And so probably from January to April, we were doing so much planning and moving and making sure these things were in place, family meetings,
Mhm.
picking out clothes, coordinating with the church and everything. And finally, my client did pass away, and I was able to go to the service. And I'm sitting like in the back of the church, and I'm just thinking, for me, I went to go view her body, then I went to sit down. And to me, Nicole, that was success. Like,
Yeah.
even though this was like an end of life
Mhm.
situation, I have been working so closely with this family through the ups and downs of everything, and getting resources pulled together. Their church was amazing in making sure this woman was cared for. And I was just blessed enough to be able to coordinate that and to be involved in their life. And just to hear the beautiful things that people were saying about who she was, to see that everything worked out from the clothes to the casket to the program. And even though it was such a sad moment, that was success.
Yeah.
You know, that was a reminder of, this is why I do this, or this is why we do this, and this is why we need a support system. Did I have to be at the funeral? Probably not. But that, for me, that was another example of going beyond the check boxes and really being able to step back and breathe and just be there in someone else's time of need, because we're all going to get there. And like I said, I just really feel fortunate to be able to have been in that process of defining success for them and helping them think clearly in a moment that was so distressing, and just put those puzzle pieces together. And I think all in all, things ended well.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, how important. And I'm sure that family was so incredibly grateful for your support and kindness and empathy in those moments. Yeah. We want to live beyond the check boxes. And with that, you had said there are those personalities that we want that guideline. Is there a place, because I do hear from families that they're like, where can I go to find, what do I even need to think of? What do I need to consider, whether it's documents, legal, how to navigate this world of aging? Do you recommend, or do you have a starting place for families, a checklist that we could start with, but then obviously have our mindset be bigger than that?
Yeah, Nicole, I do have, I mentioned the Aging Life Care Association. I feel like that is a wonderful place to start. There are tons of articles. Like I said, there are a lot of professionals on there who offer just free consultations. So even if you decide, oh, I don't want to go with the care manager, get someone to point you in the right direction. Also, I think another great resource is our community, our online community, our Agent and Amazing Signature online community. You can go in there and post and ask your questions. So maybe we just want to start right where you are, because sometimes a lot of frustration is like, look, I already did all that other stuff. I just want to skip right here. Like,
here's my question. Yeah.
Here is the question. Where do I go get this document? Even though my mom's not able to sign it? Like, what's the process? So being able to post your question and ask that. And also the beautiful part is having another professional in there who may say, hey, go here. This is what I use. So really and then don't you be afraid to use your good friend Google, but use it with discretion. And I think even reaching out to well-known podcasters, like information, like I lean on, like All Home Care Matters is great. They're very involved in the community and post a lot of resources. Nicole, your podcast is great. Sometimes just looking at different podcasts and say, oh, that speaker was on there that talked about this. I'm going to start there, because most of us are on these platforms and sharing information because we want you to reach out. Absolutely. We want you to ask us questions. We want to point you in the right direction, because we realize you have to have your people, as you say, Nicole, to make this work.
Yeah. Completely. And what's really cool about podcasts is that they live on, right? They're evergreen. It's always searchable. And when you go into, let's say, All Home Care Matters or my podcast, when you go into the podcast, you can there's a search bar up top, and you could type in the person or the topic you're looking for within all of that. And that helps kind of steer you in the right direction too. So that is another tip that we can start there, right? Have specific need or question that we need support on. Yeah.
Right. I agree. And it's so cool because you actually get to hear the person speak. It's like, oh, okay. You kind of get to vet them
Yeah.
in a sense and say, okay, I want to move forward to ask more information, or at least if they have a website or something I can go to.
Absolutely. Dive a little deeper. Yeah. How are you hopeful, and what are your aspirations and dreams for this future of caregiving? How do you envision this concept of care beyond the checkboxes growing and being more widespread and impactful in this field?
I'm very hopeful. My prayer is that I continue to have the energy,
Yeah.
the energy, the creativity that I constantly submit myself to learning and feedback, and that I'm clothed in humility and grace as I work with families, because we're always learning. I'm hoping that people get more tools and more platforms to fit our various needs and personalities out there. So where there's an agent in Amazing, there may be another agency out there that's built this other platform that now we're able to coordinate everything in one space. I'm so inclined to just be open to what's out there, to collaborate, to learn, and just immerse my learning and growth in this industry, and know that, hey, I'm leaving my mark, but hoping and praying that the younger generations come and run with it. Come run with it and make it better. And I am here. I think my company's here to be that hand that reaches back and says, hey, like, I went this far, let me pull you up. I need you to take it further. And I'm rooting behind you to give you the information, the resources that you need. And that's wherever you are in your journey. Sometimes you just need a hand to pull you up and somebody to believe in you. And we may be fostering or watering the next aging innovator. So I'm all about growing and seeing other people's success. And I feel like that's how we'll all continue to age amazingly, sharing and just sharing information and being open to the new next thing.
Yes. I am hopeful because you are in this space, and that brings me so much joy, and you inspire other people and you uplift all of us. So we're only better because you're here, and I just appreciate your thoughtfulness and how you share and how you educate. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. You're so sweet and kind. And I'm just wishing you so many blessings. And I've just been watching you grow, and it's just going to be great. So thank you for just being a voice for the aging profession and all our family caregivers out there.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed our episode, please subscribe and give us 5 stars. In all honesty, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to our episode.